Hello everyone and welcome to a new Gwent video guide. This is for Sharp Teeth, so I'm calling it. It is a Monsters Blood Scent deck, focusing on bleeding, vampires, and just overall some big units as well to seal the deal. So what we're going to do in this video is I'm going to run through the list here. We've got it open here. We'll run through our choices, kind of go over our picks and why things are there, general gameplay and stuff like that. And then we're going to move on to some gameplay. So we've got two games. We've got a loss and a win, where I am going to be voicing over, going through our plays, kind of why we do certain things, and just giving a general idea of why we played the game that way. To hopefully give you guys a bit of context on how to play the deck and just give you guys the best shot of playing it yourself. So let's start here with the list. So we're going to start from the bottom. And we have transmuted some cards since then, so we've got these gross duplicates, but that's irrelevant. We're going to start with the bottom with our 4 provision cards. So you can see this deck has got a lot of vampires and a lot of bleeding. So we've got 2 Bruxa, which are pretty key vampire bleed cards, 3 power with 2 points of bleeding with Thrive. We'll go over these ones quite fast. We do have one choice of the Iron Falcon Knife Juggler here. It's not like a necessity to the deck or anything, but it can synergize quite nicely with some of the cards we have. But just one of them there. We also have the Plumard to get the Bonded on 2 of them, also a vampire. Garcane, nice bleeding engine, so you've pretty often, almost all the time actually, got an enemy unit with bleed, so this is almost always gaining 1 point per turn, which is lovely. Feast of Blood is a Purify card that deals with enemy defender cards really well. So not only does it purify them, it also deals 3 damage, and if you've got a vampire, which you pretty much always do, you're also giving them bleeding for 3 turns. So very nice card. You could even make a case to include 2 of these instead of the Iron Falcon Knife Juggler probably. But 1 seems to be fine, but 2 might be better. Depends what you're coming up against. Next up we've got Nicorette. So this is a very key card. So this is a 3 power 5 provision vampire. 2 of these, so both with Zeal and Order melee, give an enemy unit bleeding for 2 turns, cooldown 2, and whenever you play a vampire you reduce its cooldown by 1. So these are very key engines you've got for bleeding your opponent, and if these don't get answered you can do some real damage. Often playing, giving 2 bleed a turn if you're playing vampires every turn. So very nice cards to include. Really good for getting some power and points in round 1, and if left unanswered for later in the game they could be pretty devastating. Alp received a recent change, so we do have 2 of these. Another vampire. It's essentially a Bruxa without Thrive that deals 4 bleeding instead of 2. Just all around solid. And now we're into our gold cards. This is where it gets fun. So we've obviously got Gale here, which is very often a 10-point card or more depending on how big your enemy is. So if your enemy is under bleeding you deal 3 damage, if it's not you just deal 1, and the death blow is that you gain its base power. So this could give a lot of points over a long round if you can bring down a huge unit, and even then if you kill a 3 or 4 power unit this is usually a 10-point card, which is very nice. Queen of the Night, another really great utility vampire. So in melee it gives bleeding 4, and in range it purifies a unit, either friendly or enemy. So you can purify a defender, you can purify, say, vitality, status, resilience, you can take poison off your own unit, bounty, bleeding, all that stuff. So really great utility. Queen of the Night, excellent choice. Armored Arrakis, another new card. So this gives bleeding to an enemy unit equal to its base power. It's not a vampire unfortunately, but it does synergize with our bleed cards. There could be an opportunity to swap this card out for something else in the 8 slot. I quite like it, but up to you. I tend to find it works pretty well. It's a fairly decent sized body too, so I enjoy it. Good for long rounds as well. Goliath, a great monster choice, so just a big dude for 8 power. Often the Death Wish isn't really impactful, doesn't really make a difference, so that's usually not too much of a concern. He's huge, 10 power, only 8 provisions, which is obviously great. Works to get your dominance off with your Proto Flitter, and also helps to get Thrive for those units that have it. So all around just a good card, and a solid target for Weaver's Incantation, which we'll get to. Elzur's Double Cross, just basically a way to play a huge card, whether that's Jurgen or the Cave Troll or Goliath, whatever your biggest unit is and you tend to have a few, Elzur's is going to be pulling something good. Osriel, classic monster inclusion really. Obviously Goliath we just mentioned before, so Osriel's going to be pretty handy to eat Goliath later in the game if you do need to play him early. But primarily you probably want to use him to eat Jurgen, which we'll get to later. But Osriel is a late game card, short round 3, can be like massive 14 points very often. So he's often just a huge powerhouse, and in a pinch you can play in melee to, say, punish an enemy, renew or something. Or second wind is probably a common one. You could eat a defender or something big that your opponent wants to replay with second winds. That can actually be quite significant. Osriel, he's cheap, he's only 9, and you can often get massive power, so pretty decent card. One thing to look out for is that he can get countered by, say, Morkvarg, which can be a bit of an issue. But that happens not often enough to where you wouldn't include him, and you can also defend him with the Cave Troll. So still a great card to include. Next up, Proto-Fleeted, like I mentioned before, just a solid card really. Normally a 10 for 9 as long as you've got dominance, with you, which you often do with all these big cards. You can drain the enemy for 3. Not too many engines at 3 power now, which makes the Proto-Fleeted not quite as good as he used to be. Still decent, gets rid of Dwarven Mercenaries, that kind of stuff. But even then, he's just a good point value. So still a good card, and he's a vampire, which is obviously great. Now we've got Arianna. So Arianna is probably the key card in our deck here. This is the card that wins you games. So Arianna is very powerful. So 4 power, 9 provisions. Deploy, give an enemy unit bleeding with a duration equal to the number of allied vampires. Normally 4 or 5 is on average, maybe 3. And that's if you put her ranged or melee, and then if you put her in the ranged, she also boosts by the number of bleeding units. So this card is used in conjunction often with 2 or 3 of your leader abilities all at once to immediately boost by 4 every turn. So Arianna is actually a very strong short or long round card. Even if you just get 2 turns with Arianna, you can often boost her up to 12. And if you have a long round where you've got enemies bleeding every turn for 9 or 10 turns, you can get enormous. And with the addition of the Cave Troll from Iron Judgment, you can protect her really well too. So Arianna is super key and pretty much makes the deck. So very highly recommended to probably save it around 3 or 2 if you're pushing, because she is just that powerful. Catachin is just all around a solid vampire. Immediately an 8 for 9 with Thrive and a Death Wish. So doesn't easily get removed, but just an all-around solid vampire, big points, and yeah, just decent. Cave Troll. So now this is the guy that really helps get these engines off, like Arianna, protects your Goliath and such like that. So he's the new defender card for monsters. He's 7 power for 9 provisions. He also has 4 armor, which you can't see under my face cam there, but 4 armor. Get my word for it. And he's just got defender. Nothing else. Nothing too complicated, but pretty easy round 3 start is to play this guy, and then start, you know, playing engines like Arianna on the same row, or say Garcane, or your Nicorettes. Really good protection card, and if they do want to get through to get, you know, your engines, they have to go through him first. So super decent. Naglfar, classic monsters card. You'd struggle to see a monster deck without one of these guys. But looks at 2 random gold cards from your deck and plays one and puts the other at the top. So just a really good way of getting at your golds, and can also be sneakily used with Weaver's Incantation. So if you use Naglfar, you get Weaver's and something else. You then play Weaver's and then you draw a card, so you get both, which is really, really cool. So good synergy there, and also just a solid card. Alright, nearing the end, we've got Jurgen, another new addition with the Iron Judgment expansion. So it's a 13 power for 10 provision, so huge card. And deploy, gain armor equal to the number of cards in your hand. And if this unit has no armor, destroy self. So bit of a scary card. You know, it's up to you how you want to use him. You can either drop him at the start of a round, gain say 9 armor, and hope that your opponent can't get through it. Or you drop him at the end with low armor in the hopes that your opponent has used their removal cards. A good way to do it is either maybe use him round 2 if you need a round 2 card to take the round, and then you can eat it with Osriel. You can also eat it from hand with Weaver's Incantation, which is really, really nice, and then also eat it with Osriel. Or you can protect it with the Cave Troll. So you've got a few options there. Overall, it is just a huge card for very cheap. So you're pretty much always going to get value out of him, but just got to be a bit careful with how you play him. And last up we have Weaver's Incantation. Really nice inclusion here, lets you say eat that Jurgen or that Goliath there, just to get through those negative death wishes that may or may not be a problem. And then it gets in the graveyard for Osriel and also draws a card. So just really nice, works great in round 3, works with Thrive, does all that good stuff. So yeah, just a all around really solid card. And that's the list there, so it's pretty tight honestly. There's not a ton of changes I would make. I could consider swapping out the Armored Arrakis for maybe something else in the 8 power slot, maybe like an Imluous Wrath. If you're lacking a bit of removal, or even a Toad Prince wouldn't be too bad either. It kind of depends on your kind of meta as you steered at the time. But I found Armored Arrakis to be a solid card, and even then it's just you know, nice to use in your expansion card. One other thing you could do is also maybe run like a marching orders. You could cut out the Iron Falcon Knife Juggler, and then you'd be guaranteed to pull Weavis or Osriel, which is also pretty nice. So up to you, that's probably a bit of a flex spot. You could also maybe, like I said, cut that Iron Falcon Knife Juggler and run another Feast of Blood. Yeah, it's kind of up to you. Those are probably the recommendations I'd make, if any. Other than that, I feel like the list is pretty solid as is, and I've been seeing some really decent success with it. So what we're going to do is cut into some gameplay. Like I said, we've got 2 games that we're going to go through, and I'm going to run you through our game plan there, and let you know kind of why we do the things we do, and hopefully give you guys a bit of context onto why we do them and help you play it yourself. So let's get into that right now, and let's get to it. Alrighty, here we are, so let's get to it. So we are playing Blood Scent, coming up against the Mystic Echo, probably a pretty familiar deck for all you guys out there. So we've got our first mulligan here, so this is our first round. We obviously probably don't want to keep cards like Osriel, and the Iron Falcon Knife Juggler is probably just, you know, something we could chuck as well. It's not the greatest card in the world, but it's nothing terrible. So we'll just keep it for now, just chucking Osriel. So this matchup is interesting. So in hindsight, we are playing against dwarves, so we want to kind of make sure we can try and win round 1 and then push them out of the game, or at least bleed them out of the game. Here's kind of a difficult choice, because with those 3 dwarves, they're pretty obviously going to be playing Munro, which is going to transform them into rowdy dwarves. So I don't want to give them bleeding quite yet with the Iron Falcon. He does play the Defender, so we set up with the Garcane, so now we can at least bleed and get immediate value. We do get the low roll on the Iron Falcon there. So I was hoping we'd hit a Defender with that, but unfortunately not, and in comes the Munro, and the bleed's negated. So that's a bit unfortunate, but it was going to happen one way or another. Now we can start getting bleeds out without fear of, you know, having them transformed. And I do actually use a leader ability here, just so I can try and kill those berserkers as fast as possible, because we're probably not going to be able to get through the armor with bleeding, but we can get through their low health. Unfortunately, the tempering does kind of negate that. So we've got a bit of a choice to make here. We either have to commit cards big time in order to take this round 1, or we let dwarves win round 1 and then kind of control the game, which is not a good place you want to be in. So I do choose to push, get Arianna down early and take this round 1. So I'm hoping that he either plays here or passes. He does end up passing, which is probably the least ideal choice. I would rather win on even cards. Unfortunately, we don't. So we do just take the round 1 card down. And using Arianna here is probably a bit of a contentious choice in hindsight. Maybe shouldn't have done it. Should have just stuck with some big cards, maybe a Goliath and a Catachan, because Arianna is so key to this deck. Not having Arianna in round 3 is pretty bad for us in this game. But we'll get to that when we get there. So we do win round 1, and now we get to control the game. Dwarves obviously still a very scary deck after the latest expansion, and even though we've had some patches since then, they're still very, very scary. So I don't want to let them be able to control the game. A lot of key cards still left in our deck as well. Jurgen, we do end up pulling it with Alzia's double cross, so I pull him early. He gets 7 armor, which is a decent amount. And I've kind of decided that we're going to try and push him out of the game here, or at least bleed him to where we can force a leader ability. But with Arianna gone, it makes our long round potential not nearly as strong, because she can get so many points over rounds, but without her, it could be tough. Well, we've got some big dudes, but we don't have many engines apart from that Nicorette. In hindsight, I should have played all of these cards in the melee row to protect that Nicorette. We did skip a little section there, but I played the Nicorette. So in hindsight, definitely should have played the defender in the melee row along with everything else. So that was a bit of a mistake. So I'm eyeing up a pass at some point. I would like to force out his leader ability, which is the goal, before passing. Otherwise, even though we'll probably be on even cards, or maybe even a card up, him having a leader ability is not good for us at all. Now that Zoltan's pretty scary, so now Jurgen's exposed, which means only 5 damage, gets rid of 13 points, which is not good at all. But Gale does provide some value there, gives us Thrive, gets rid of one of the engines, and you know, that's 13 points. 14 with the bleed, so maybe there's a chance. At this point I'm getting pretty scared, so if we play now and he removes their Jurgen, there's a possibility that we are going to be a card down. So I do choose to pass. In hindsight, maybe we should have pushed, maybe not. The Moon Dust does deal with him, and now we're 1 point down, which is agonizingly close. And unfortunately do lose the round. So now we're on even cards in a short-ish round with our opponent having a leader ability. So it's very much not a good state for us. And you can see if we'd had that Arianna for round 2, we probably could have taken that round 2 and gone for a 2-0. Do try and high roll the mulligan here. Don't get lucky. Looking for, say, an Armored Arrakis or something. Don't get it. So our hand's not the greatest. Obviously Goliath and Osriel are very nice, but our bronzes don't give a ton of value immediately, and over time they can only give so much. And coming up against these guys, it's going to be trouble. You probably noticed in round 2 he did actually play a mercenary, so he can't use 4 of them, but 2 of them plus 2 berserkers is scary enough. Luckily we do have a special card to remove one of them, but unfortunately he just has too much for us to deal with. So that Dennis is pretty key, so it removes our ability to actually get rid of that mercenary, and now we don't even have dominance to get full value from our flitter. So I do drop the Osriel in order to ideally secure dominance. And as of right now, it's sort of looking even-ish, but then Zoltan comes down, he gets more dwarf charges, and eventually it's just far too much for us to deal with. So that's the cost of losing Arianna, really. If we'd had Arianna in that second round, I think we would have had enough points and enough initiative to actually secure that. Unfortunately not, and we do lose this game. So it's very important to choose where to deploy your key cards like that. And you see we failed our deployment and such lost the game. But we'll move on here. And here we are. So on our second game here, we're coming up against a Death's Shadow deck, so a fellow monster deck. Another pretty common deck you'll be coming up against on ladder right now. So we're again presented with our mulligan. We're going to chuck Iron Falcon and also a Feast of Blood and get started. So there's a few cards here that aren't ideal for us. So bleeding, those guys would be ideal, being able to get through them, but obviously having Thrive, he's probably going to be able to get Thrive on those units, so bleeding them isn't going to be as important. So I do track the Garcane in order to maybe get out another unit that we can bleed first, and he does in fact go with that with the Andraga eggs. This whole deck matchup is actually not super ideal because we don't really want to kill his units in most cases, because most of them have Death Wish, so we have to time our bleeds quite well. But we can bleed the Andraga egg to some extent, so we do start with that. And now we have 2 engines going, with the Nicorette and the Garcane. Flogger as well, another unit we don't really want to kill, but we can bleed a bit. And as long as we get value, you know, if he consumes these units, that's fine if we get at least, you know, a turn or two of bleed on them. So we did get that 1 turn of bleed on the Andraga egg. And there we go. Now the bleed on the lava there is really because I'm foreseeing the consume, so it's really not, the bleed is not going to be well spent on those foglets. So at least we do negate thrive for a couple of turns. And there we go, there's the consume. And he does boost here, I believe. Yep. So we don't want to fall too far behind. We want to make sure we can actually, you know, win this round if he passes. And luckily with these big cards in hand we can. So Goliath could really take it up here. This is when my wife came in asking about card arts, so to show us some cool ones. Arianna, probably one of the best card arts in the game, especially the premium for sure. I mean, she's on the thumbnail, which is obviously pretty good. So he's played another Andraga egg, and we decide to play another Bruxa. More bleed over there, and more bleed over there. So the bleed starts to stack up, and you'll find that with all these bleed engines going on, you can actually steal rounds quite easily. Unfortunately, this matchup does lead to a lot of bleed negation with consume. But we're starting to fall fairly far behind here. We're now 18 points behind, so I do pass. The good thing about this deck is that if you do get pushed round 2, you can counter that with these big cards and also some very powerful engines that can really come out of nowhere, basically Arianna. So I'm not too worried about giving this deck in particular last say, and we don't want to be able to, you know, we don't want to be 2 cards down. So I do keep the Iron Falcon Knife Juggler here as good bait if he was going to pass. He actually didn't pass. But one thing is to be careful here. We're missing Death Shadow, which means we've got Imperial Manticores. So in a world, in an ideal world, against any random deck, maybe we'd play Jurgen here to secure round 2. But if we did that here and he has Imperial Manticore, that's going to be insane value. So that's one thing to keep in mind in this matchup especially. So I consciously make sure to play units that are small first, in order to play around those Manticores and also around those Marooners. So if we played Garkin first, without a bleed on the field, he would be able to seize that with Maruna. So we do play around that. And he does actually have it in hand. You don't know now, but he does play them soon. So we did actually play around those quite smartly. So something to keep in mind if you're coming up against this particular matchup. And ideally we can get out of this round a card up. So I do want to commit some cards here. But that might not be possible. At least don't come out of it a card down. I think they're 26 points, 23 points up, so we're going to have to commit something. This is kind of one of these times when you're not sure if you want to use Arianna, because as soon as we play Arianna, he may just pass, but if he's going the whole hog, we need to make sure we play Arianna early. So I do actually go for it, but I save one of our leader abilities. So this plus one more card gives us enough value to actually win this round without having to go a card down, which is lovely. And we do go with the Goliath here. Counting up the points, making sure we're good, but we've got 6 with the bleeding and Arianna and then another 10, so no worries. So that's another situation where we maybe didn't have to use Arianna, but I wanted to in order to be able to secure it. And like I said, if he was going to push us the whole way, I want to make sure we can get some good value out of her. Because while she is good in a short round with a couple of turns, she's great in a long round with 5 or 6 turns if she can't be answered. And now here we are, final round, 6 cards each. We still have 1 leader ability left, as well as some big cards such as Jurgen, Osriel, and Protoflitter. But here's another one of the situations. I don't want to start with Jurgen, because if he's got Manticore, that's like game over, essentially. So I do purposefully start with a lower card here in order to play around their Manticore, and then I hit him with a leader ability as well to give us that 2 power token, which also plays around Manticore. And you'll see later that he does have it in hand, so if we'd started with one of these big plays, we probably would have lost the game. So playing that 2 power unit is very, very, very critical. He can seize it, but seizing a 2 power unit is not really that significant. One thing we could have done a turn earlier is maybe Feast of Blood that Cave Troll instead of doing it now, so we did lose 2 points of bleed on that. But, you know, not hugely significant, but if you're playing, you know, for every single point, then that would be the way. And there we go. So that's the Manticore, so you can see we very much dodged a massive bullet there. And just pretty happy with that play. Catacomb comes down. Again, another 2 power token just in case some, you know, renew shenanigans or whatever. But yeah, making sure you've got that small unit against this matchup is very key. We have Dominance. I do actually kill the Harpy Egg here just in case of like any more Death Wish triggers. And if he has no more Death Wish cards in hand, then his leader ability would also be dead. So you know, yourself maybe would or wouldn't want to do that. Depends on the situation. Does use leader ability there. We can Osriel Jurgen and get enough points to win the game. And that's going to be it. He's not going to have nearly enough to catch up. And that really just shows the power of this deck in especially short round and long run with Arianna. So I hope you guys have enjoyed. Hope this deck guide helps you out. And I hope you guys have fun with the deck on ladder. And if you guys want to watch me play this deck live, then come join me on my live stream over on Twitch. I stream 5 days a week, Monday through Friday at 2 PM Pacific, 5 PM Eastern at twitch.tv/Zade_95. There's a link in the description. I hope to see you guys over there. So thank you very much for watching. There's a link to a written guide in the description, and we'll see you next time.